The sterile smell that clung to the walls of the courtroom restroom was a combination of old tile and industrial soap. I stood at the sink, my hands wet, sleeves rolled up, wiping away the final remnants of the janitor's work, long after he had finished. The room was deserted, save for the gentle hum of fluorescent lights above me. A trail of water stretched across the smooth surface. Hearings, paperwork, and the steady pace of order and discussion had consumed the entire morning. Yet, in this brief moment, I took a second to relax. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. The condescending tone was unmistakable. "Did you leave law school to work as a janitor?" I didn't have to turn around to recognize Eric. His voice was blatantly snarky, dripping with that same arrogance he had always wielded like a weapon. He thrived on disparaging people, especially me. Slowly, I turned around, observing him as he stood in the doorway, hands in the pockets of his well-tailored suit, shoes scarcely polished. He touched the weathered tile, appearing exactly as I remembered, confident and flawless. He was having fun, wearing that smug grin, the one that always made my fury boil. I looked down at the rag in my hands, the damp mark on my palm. He thought this was his moment of triumph. I let the silence stretch between us, watching his grin widen in anticipation, waiting for me to stutter, to explain, to rationalize. But instead, I folded the rag with purposeful ease. I set it down on the sink's edge, adjusted my tie, and rubbed my fingertips across the smooth fabric. The weight of power was woven into every stitch of my outfit. Then, before I met his eyes, I slid my jacket over my shoulders. Eric's grin faltered. For the first time since he entered the room, his smug confidence wavered. His eyes flickered downward, to the symbol of authority pinned to my chest, the gold-plated insignia, the weight of my title. Silence filled the room. Concrete evidence that I was not the man he thought I was. I watched his jaw tighten, his composure crack, his mind struggling to reconcile the failure he had once mocked with the person standing in front of him. It was poetic, really. For years, he had ridiculed me, pretended I was beneath him, and now, I watched as he swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly. You're the judge?" I let the question linger. Let him sit with his own disbelief. Then, at last, I nodded. "Yes, Eric, I'm the judge." He looked like he wanted to say something, to hurl an insult, to regain even a sliver of his lost confidence. But no words came. He simply stood there, frozen. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to smirk. This moment, this silence, spoke for itself. Eric shifted slightly, clearing his throat, forcing himself back into that arrogant stance. But it wasn't the same. His self-assurance was fraying at the edges. He forced a laugh. "You really worked your way up, huh?" It wasn't a joke. It was a nervous exhale. I met his gaze evenly, and for the first time, Eric didn't know how to react. He had come here expecting humiliation, expecting to revel in my downfall. Instead, he had stepped into something he never anticipated. And I turned away, grabbing the folder I had set on the counter earlier. My afternoon docket was full, cases, people waiting, more important matters than Eric's wounded pride. As I walked past him, I paused briefly, offering him one last glance. "Have a good day, Eric. I have a hearing to attend." I left him standing there, felt his gaze burning into my back as I exited the room. But it didn't matter, because for the first time, Eric saw me for who I truly was. Not a failure, not a man beaten by life, but the very thing he had spent years trying to convince me I could never become. And that was justice. He made sure my name was never mentioned. I allowed my time in law school to be merely a footnote in their flawless tale, since after everything, I had lost all I had fought for, my future, my love, and my dreams. Yet, the problem with males, like Eric, is that they think the game is over once they win and don't consider what occurs when the man they destroyed returns more resilient, shrewd, and prepared to reclaim everything. Life has a tendency of putting you in awkward situations and guiding you to places you never would have imagined. I believed that after dropping out of law school, I had decided to be the man who gave up all for his family. Yet making a sacrifice doesn't result in praise or rewards. It simply takes and keeps taking until you don't know if it's appreciation or acknowledgement. Who you are no more. I initially assured myself that it was only temporary. I thought I would find my way back once my mother was secure and my brothers were independent, but life doesn't wait for you. The medical expenditures continued to mount, and my mother's therapies were costly. My brothers were still in need. I accepted whatever work I could find because I was in school, and my debt kept getting bigger. Delivery, construction, warehouse work, or any other job that earned enough to support my family. One by one, my old peers became lawyers after graduating and passing the bar, but I was only... The most difficult aspect of survival wasn't the labor itself, but rather the humiliation people felt. I noticed the silent sympathy in their eyes and the nods that indicated, "Oh, what a waste," when they realized I had dropped out. Then came the whispers. He was meant to be someone significant, with a bright future, but I suppose some people just can't. I could ignore outsiders while under pressure, but seeing Olivia's name in legal circles really got to me. Eric was right there with her, prospering in the world, and I knew she had the future I had always desired. The worst part was that I couldn't even be angry with her for it since I had already let it happen and let go. I believed the tipping point was that life doesn't give you second chances. Everything changed that night, although it wasn't a spectacular or profound epiphany. It was simply fatigue from yet another long shift, not a film-like epiphany. My feet hurt from working security at a construction site throughout the day, and my hands were raw late at night. A shabby club at night, I hardly had time for food or rest, and each payday was gone before I could even hold it. Only then did I notice my own reflection in a small metaphorical manner, passing by in a dirty break room's cracked mirror. I appeared to be a man who was 20 years older than I am. My eyes were sunken, my face hollow, and I didn't see myself anymore. Instead, I saw a man who had given up, and I felt something inside of me. I realized I had given too much, and that this wasn't who I was meant to be. Too much to allow this to be the conclusion of my story. The turning point, which began modestly. I took advantage of my little study time by pulling out my old books and borrowing any legal texts I could find. On my phone, I could access studied cases during breaks and listen to lectures while working shifts I hadn't been in before. The game had been on for years, but the desire, the drive, and the fire persisted. I must demonstrate to the world that I'm not finished yet. But ambition alone cannot change fate. Therefore, life gave me a lifeline when my mother got married again. Although he was a wonderful man, her new husband, Dr. Harris, was nothing like my father. He took my brothers under his wing and was a stable, caring, and affluent man who could lighten our problems. His wing provided them a future I could never have afforded by helping to pay for their school. Then he turned to face me and said, "One night, you sacrificed everything for them. But now it's time for you to take something. Return for yourself." I initially refused, telling myself it was too late, too far behind. But Dr. Harris gave me more than just financial support. He had faith in me. It took me years to believe in myself, and sometimes that's all it takes. With his help, I returned to law school. But this time, I was a guy who had lost everything, had struggled to regain it, which made my return risky. Returning to the lecture hall after being away for years felt like entering a battleground. Some instructors were surprised to see me, while others were skeptical and believed I would burn out again. However, they were unaware of the fact that I had previously dealt with the worst that life could offer and that I had nothing left to lose. I stayed up till dawn studying harder than I had ever done before because I wasn't just trying to pass. I was trying to dominate. I studied case law, analyzed each point of contention as if it were my last, and I outperformed every student in my class, rising to the top one by one. I won discussions, aced tests, and impressed the academics who first believed I was hopeless. And I was aware of this when I passed the bar test on my first try. After years of fighting my way up, I wasn't stopping, because I wanted to be more than just a lawyer. Eric had won the first round, but he was unaware of the fight. Thus, I had earned the right to take it all back from rock bottom. It was by no means over, but leaving law school was the most difficult choice I've ever had to make. However, going back, that was a distinct kind of struggle. I was no longer merely a wide-eyed student, but a man who had experienced failure, who had experienced the pain of missed chances, and the resentment of being abandoned when everyone else ran ahead. But this time, I wasn't merely pursuing a fantasy. I was pursuing justice for my family and myself. For every time life has thrown me a curveball, challenged me to remain there, but I declined. It wasn't simple for me to return. Older than the majority of my classmates, they were just graduating from college and still thrilled about the opportunity to work in law. However, they had theory, I had experience. I had already been through hell, and that was crucial in helping me return to the top. As soon as I re-enrolled, I went into law school like a battlefield. I was the first to know what failure felt like, and I had no desire to go through it again. I studied case law as if my life depended on it, spending one morning in the library and the last one to go at night because it did, in many respects. What I had given up years of sweat and honor to, I couldn't afford to be mediocre because the teachers saw that I wasn't. They called on me first during debates, pushed me harder, and expected more because I was simply a student, not a machine. Soon, after the other kids noticed the hunger on the edge, but it didn't take long before my name began to reappear throughout the hallways, just as it had before I left. Except this time, people began approaching me for counsel on cases because